what if guilt is there for a reason? And what if when you feel guilt, it's actually trying to teach you something that you can leverage for your future?
Man, I wish I had that. I wish I had that saying, because what happens when we go through relationships, more often than not, we actually become lesser versions of ourselves because of that guilt, because we don't have that mindset. In this relationship, let's learn how to use that to our advantage.
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia.
This conversation is one that probably every single one of us can relate to, even if you've never been in a toxic, quote unquote, relationship. We've all had times and situations where we stayed in relationships for way longer than we should have, whether it's an intimate relationship, a work relationship, a friendship relationship, any sort of relationship. Now, Emilia and I in this episode are going to be particularly referring to intimate relationships, but the topic and the concept can apply to anyone at any time. And I guess I want to start us off with a little personal story. So what was this? 2021. Yeah, because we started Evolve or Y Power podcast early 2019. So, or late 2019. So 2021, I had gotten into a relationship with someone, and oh God, it was just a disaster. It was a disaster of a relationship, and everything that, like, from the start to the finish, it was just, I was a broken shell of a human being, for lack of a better phrase. And this person came into my life, and we were not compatible by any stretch of the imagination, but I just wanted love. I needed somebody. I needed for a change in my life. And the relationship lasted for almost a year. And lesser known, it actually almost resulted in Emilia and I splitting up the organization, and she and I probably never talking again because of what happened in that dynamic and who I became as a result of it. And when that relationship ended, I was so unbelievably broken because I didn't know the consequences of what happened, like, in all of the other areas of my life until I finally got out of it. And then Emilia and I started having conversations, and I was having conversations with the other important people in my life, and they were really letting me know their thoughts and feelings. And I was like, oh my God, I almost just ruined my life. This person almost just ripped me from everything and everyone that mattered to me. And the guilt and the shame that I felt in the aftermath of that, I thought I would never recover from. I was so humiliated. I was so ashamed. I felt so guilty for what happened. And to be honest, it took years for me to overcome that. And it took me a really long time to get to the place where I could look back on that situation, which is what we're going to be talking about in this episode, and really be able to say, okay, I used the guilt and I used the lessons that I took away from this situation to make me better and to be a better woman and to be a better friend and a better leader and a better partner and a better everything in general. From your perspective, why do people stay longer than they should? Because I think that's the primary question that will eventually lead us into why do we end up feeling so guilty? And then how do we heal from that guilt? So from your perspective and from what you've seen in all the research that you've done, I know my experience of it, but from the clinical side, why do we stay longer than we know we should?
There's a couple of components that are at play here that we've all experienced to one degree or another. That's why something like this is so challenging to talk about without feeling a little bit of that pang of guilt, because you go back and what is guilt? You really think about guilt as that quote unquote moral injustice or out of alignment behavior that happened when it comes to something that you value, or maybe a boundary that was broken that you had a part to play in. And the simplest way that I could put it before we dissect it is, at the end of the day, you don't really realize front and center, without justification of, oh no, it'll be different, or oh no, that's not true. You don't realize the implications of what you're doing or what you're not doing or who you're in relation with, and how much that overcooking of the turkey or how much you're investing in that person, for your story example, is going to have an impact on your life and what those implications are going to be. So when you had mentioned that kind of wake up, people say the come to Jesus moment, or the like epiphany or whatever it is, right?
Holy shit moment.
What really it is they've finally had the courage. Maybe they haven't, maybe I'm giving more people credit than is due. Maybe it's not. They finally had the courage. Maybe it's they had no other option but to stare in the face the truth that has been looked away from at every single turn. And I think it's actually more that than what I want it to be, which is people really mustering up the courage to actually look the truth dead center and say, like, holy shit, I now see the implications of staying in this relationship, this toxic relationship, for too long, which I call overcooking the turkey, right? Some people overcook the turkey. In other words, actually, I'm not a big fan of that anymore now as an environmentalist, but that metaphor, if you've ever heard it, it's you stay in too long. And what are the implications of that is that you start to justify things that if it were a friend, you would be able to see so much more objectively too. If it was a friend doing this, you'd be able to name what they're doing, why they're staying in that relationship too long. It's toxic in this way, this way, this way. You'd be able to literally analyze it inside and out. But because it's you, all of a sudden, now there's these cognitive distortions that really ramp up. Your attachment wounds that really are here. Your abandonment challenges are really here. Your self-identity of what it would mean for you to leave this toxic relationship. Everything that has left you exposed and vulnerable, to which this toxic relationship is taking advantage of your vulnerabilities for. You're now exposed to the truth of how vulnerable, and exposed that underdevelopment sense of having the courage or taking those actions to remove yourself out of a toxic situationship. So everyone has a different, if you will, mix of the cognitive distortions being present, of their attachment wounds being brought into the relationship, of their perception getting morphed because of the lenses that they're seeing their world in. And to put it very simply, the other person that's in the relationship with you is not going to, on their own accord, because relationships are beneficial and dynamic, even if it's not very explicit. The other person isn't going to be like, hey, I think this relationship is kind of toxic for us, and I think we should move forward. So the guilt that comes after, when you finally do have that breath of truth breathed into you, and you do make a decision to do something about it, because you're recognizing the I'm going to call it the care tax, how many F's you care about this person and you care about being in this relationship, and what you pay tax on more than you care about yourself and the longevity component of this. When you have that moment that's breathed into your life, you then have to have everything else change. And that is a ripple effect of change and looking in the mirror that most people just don't want to do. And I get that, because guilt is one of the hardest emotions, in my opinion, to metabolize. And one of the reasons why is because it's usually not just guilt. Usually it's tied to so many shame-based narratives about ourselves, about our judgment, about what we should have done, about how so many times we overrode our intuitive signaling. And a lot of that we can dissect. So there's a lot of elements here, Bianca. I'm happy to go in whatever direction you feel the listeners really need, because we've all been there. And I think this is really critical to break down in the way that's digestible for anyone who might be in that aftermath, to really consider some helpful steps.
The episode after this one, we are going to be talking about trauma bonding. And the reason I say that is because there's some questions that I'm going to ask that we're actually going to answer in that episode. So if we're like, we're going to answer this in the next one, that's why. So don't worry, we're going to answer all the questions. Let's get started with, what are the stories that we tell ourselves, and what are the narratives that we tell ourselves that keep us and keep people stuck in the relationship longer than they should? So what are the stories, the narratives, and the things that you've heard clients say for why they're staying in their toxic relationship and why they can't get out? That when they finally do, they're then going to have that guilt about, which we will then discuss how to help you get out of that. But what have you heard? What are the narratives and the stories we tell ourselves?
I had this client this week where she and I literally discussed this, and I'm so proud of her, because she is the epitome of this right now, where she is in the healing process of the aftermath of the guilt, truly, by staying in a toxic relationship. And just to give a little bit of context real quick, she had entered into this relationship and had overridden and an allusion to the stories, or alluding to the stories. I'll make them more explicit too. She had entered into a relationship with someone who could barely take care of themselves. And the story that she had told herself in order to have gone with the decision to enter into an emotionally unavailable relationship, someone who is incapable of meeting her needs, was, well, they really do like me and I really do like them. And I think that they have the potential of getting there to where they can meet my needs, to where this person can really be that connection point that I feel as though I'm really missing out in my life. And so for anyone that's listening, the story really that she was telling herself there was a story about the potential of the person that she saw in front of her. And so this man that she was considering dating, she saw very much that he had no capacity for a relationship. I'm talking literally had gone in between like getting kicked out of his apartment to in the mix of practically being homeless for 2 or 3 days prior to getting another apartment. And, you know, in that type of state, also using drugs, using substances, and doing so without any interest in trying to get help for some of the mental health challenges that he was struggling with. And she then said, it's okay, I can fix him. That was the story that she was telling herself. And yeah, how many times have we been in a spot where that's the sneaky story that is being told to ourselves, but what's being told outwardly to someone else is, no, I know they like me. I know they love me. Like, I think this person could fill temporarily this void of connection that I'm seeking. And fast forward 3 months later, and this is why I'm so proud of her, because while I was able to kind of speak to her parts and she knew it wasn't a great decision, obviously, like, people need to make their own choices and then learn from those. She had shared with me, and she had an element of pride, not in seeking external validation or approval, but more so just really proud of herself, because she said, Emilia, I broke up with him because of this and this and this. And we got through processing and the kind of entering into that healing component. And she said, I knew the whole time that he wasn't right for me and that he wasn't going to be my person. She then started crying. She's like, but I love him so much. I'm like, yeah, that really sucks, because you can love someone so much and they can still not be the right person for you. They can still not have the capacity to be in relationship with you in the way in which you need, therefore making it toxic. And she said, I know. And I just wanted him to be something so much more than what he was incapable of being because of his own desires. He didn't want to be more than what he was. And I tried to change him. So that's one of the biggest narratives in many different ways that I hear clients falling in love with potential, and the story to themselves is it will change.
Potential, or their fantasy of what they want it to be. Because in that, I'll speak for myself, in that relationship, I didn't see potential that this person could be better. I just saw potential of me finally having somebody and deluding myself into a narrative of, this is my only chance. This is finally my chance at building something and having somebody, and I will do whatever I have to do to make it work.
Yeah. It's quite common too. And that narrative comes from a standpoint of low self-belief that you are inherently lovable, that you are inherently deserving of love, and that people are attracted to you for who you are, right? That those narratives come from this standpoint of urgency and scarcity. And therefore, this opportunity that presents itself, I'm going to do whatever I can to make it work, because the fear of losing that, even if it's my delusions in this relationship, overcooking that turkey and staying too long in a toxic relationship, that seems better than this grief, this feeling to be alone. Right. So those are some really critical narratives. And Bianca, I want to share this because one of the things that to the healing around the guilt component, and then I want to hear what you've heard, what your thoughts are on this, and how we can have the integration of such help our listeners. One thing that really has struck me that I found to be helpful for clients, and this is like a weird way of thinking about the healing journey, and kind of navigating the guilt, but it is, I find, for those clients who have this like scientist part within them, it resonates. So I'll share it. There was this clip that framed what I'm about to say in this way, where when you enter into a relationship, let's say it's a male-female intimate relationship, oftentimes the characteristic is the female has one of those narratives that the potential, the change, this person, I might not have another opportunity, so might as well try to make it work. So we're going to genderify that a little bit. And what if a lot of that narrative of why you stayed in that relationship is because there was an unconscious projection that because you as a female with a 28-day cycle change 28 times in 1 month, so you have a totally different experience with change. Like biorhythmically, you change in your hormones 28 days in a month, right? Because your menstrual cycle synced up to that. But yet men or male gender only has a 24-hour period. So what they do in 1 day is the extent that they'll change, because their biology, if it's not in that 24-hour cycle, then that's all it's going to be. And the seeds of potential, if it's not in that 24-hour day, then that's what you're getting into. Whereas women have this frame and perspective of change very differently. So if you're with me and that is making sense.
Can you explain that a little bit deeper? Because I don't think that made sense.
So the 28-day cycle that women experience, they're changing so much. So they go and unconsciously project that into their relationships when it comes to other people. The other people are going to change. like there's so much potential for change, because women in a 28-day cycle, there's a lot of change that they genuinely experience and that they actualize. So the men, on the other hand, with a 24-hour cycle, the change that they'll experience is only in a 24-hour window, not in a 28-day cycle. And so when you get into a relationship, you think that this male is going to change. What if we were to tell you that the 24-hour cycle is the only time that you'll see any change? 24 hours. And if they're not changing, or quote unquote, that potential that you want them to be, and you realize there's a biorhythmic component of that from a chemical standpoint, could you take that person that you've seen in that 24-hour period, and can you accept them as they are in that 24-hour period cycle? Because if not, because you want them to change out of what you've seen with them in a day, that's helping more people understand that you're projecting that they're going to change into becoming this version of themselves that you want them to be out of your own experience with change in a 28-day cycle.
What if it's the inverse, though? What if it's the male that wants a woman to change, and they're like, well, I have 28 days to help her change. What would you say to people in that circumstance then?
It's a great question, because the opposite is also true. Okay, what change are you actually looking for? How much do you love the person within the first, let's say, fourth of that cycle? How much do you hate that quote unquote version of them when they're in their inner spring? It's just an interesting way to reflect upon that, because if you want their inner spring to change, that means you kind of don't love that quote unquote full person, and you just want this element to change. And so what I would say to that same person is, okay, 28 days, can you or have you experienced that person for that 28-day cycle? And are there any hormone modifiers that are coming into the mix that are changing that person, quote unquote, and to what extent do they want to change on their own accord? Because that the element of quote unquote they're going to change or they have potential, I just see is such a it's such a dangerous place to go, which is what both men and women stay in relationships far too long, to where they literally have told themselves that this person's quote unquote going to change, and or to the narratives that you shared, it's, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get another chance, which is just not true when you look at the statistics of people that are out there looking for love. So what are your thoughts? Maybe not necessarily on that. Maybe we can table that for another deeper discussion. But from the guilt of staying in a toxic relationship, I do think that it's a really important component of this, genuinely.
I do too.
Because I don't think anyone thinks about staying in toxic relationships and having their biology have anything to do with it. Their perception of things.
I agree. I definitely think that we're going to need to do another episode on that, because that has the potential to be so unbelievably weaponized of like, see, that's why women are crazy, because they change 28 days out of the month. And so women aren't capable of X, Y, and Z. So that's, I know that's not on your rate. That's why I'm saying that. Like, that has the potential to be so weaponized of like, see, women are crazy. Women can't lead. Women can't do this because they have a 28-day cycle and they're tapped out of their minds. That's why my face did what it did for a second. So I'm like, that's not what we're saying at all. So we're going to need to table that. But I do understand what you're saying. So our hormones and the way that it impacts our bodies does make us see things in a certain way and react in a certain way. And it allows us to believe that people are more capable of change probably than they actually are. So once the person has finally either had their come to insert deity moment here, or LOL, or they have what happened to me, which is a catastrophic event happens that they can't look past anymore, and all of the data is finally in their face that they can't run away from. what do they do in the aftermath when that massive and honestly unbearable amount of guilt and shame and humiliation and embarrassment start to come up? How do they help themselves really navigate through that without it becoming deeply embedded shame?
The first thing that I would say is get a coach or a therapist that is trauma informed. Honestly, my brain was like, go talk to, and then I was thinking about family friends and I was like, no, actually that's the worst person to go to and talk. Why? Why would you go and get a therapist or a coach, someone that's unbiased from the situation, as opposed to going and starting that healing process? Because we know healing doesn't happen in isolation, and all of those emotions that are synced up with that your associations have probably been impacted by you overcooking that relationship and staying in something that they've tried to warn you about, which your shame about distancing them to the capacity that you have. You likely are going to have struggles going in and talking about the relationship anyways, because you have that humiliation. You have the, I don't want to hear I told you so from other people. Like, that's the worst thing that can happen, because in that time, you genuinely need someone who is able to help you process through those emotions. And why did you override those emotions that cropped up in the first place, and really help you process through all of those emotional experiences that you're going to be going through. Because after any relationship, we go through a grieving cycle that if we do not have someone who is not biased towards us, like a friend or a family member, that can maintain the anonymity that you need, the level of safe space, meaning they're not going to get triggered by you sharing what you're going through, which friends and families are chronically not great at doing, and can hold safe space for you to have what the experience naturally, organically, and truly is that you're having. That is absolutely everything, because most people will do is the opposite of that. They will go to a friend or go to the next person that they know that kind of knew the situation, or they'll isolate. Either way, they're not great strategies. Why? Because you're then healing in some form of detached communal healing, which is not actually healing. It is more so, I told you so, and let me make up for my quote unquote moral injustices or sins that you told me about. And that just further induces shame. And so that is the first strategy that I would suggest anyone who is trying to heal from a toxic relationship. And yes, it might require you to invest in yourself. Yes, it's going to cost you money. Yes, it's going to cost you time. Yes, it's going to cost you energy. And that is the last thing you're probably feeling you want to do. However, your future self will thank you, because it is an investment that will consistently pay off, as opposed to going to the bottom of a barrel, going to the bottom of a blunt, going to some substance or some human that doesn't have the capacity to hold space for you. So that is very charged in lots of data. Bianca, what would you suggest?
On the day that we are recording this, so we're recording this on the 8th and this comes out on the 10th. I actually did a video today for my YouTube, which is a branch off of this podcast. I talk about very similar things. And it was basically about, so the topic was, give me 10 minutes and I'll save you 10 years of mental health struggles. And basically what I said in that video was, so many of us go through these really radical experiences, and when we're finally out of it, we go to therapy or we go to healing or we go to growth as a way to fix ourselves based on the assumption that we are broken. To what you just said, now I need to make up for all the moral failures and sins. I need to make up for, all of the terrible grievances that I have had and all the mistakes I made, and I have to do this and I have to do that. And that's actually that's like the antithesis of what you are supposed to do. If you need to, in order to heal from trauma, in order to heal from circumstances that led to shame, what you actually need to do once you've gotten a therapist is actually, or a trauma certified coach, you have to go back to the root of what made you make those decisions in the first place, which is exactly what you said at the beginning of this and what I said in that video. It's not about fixing you. It's not about, oh my God, I did this terrible thing and now I'm broken and I'm an awful person and now I'm even worse than I was before. Because what are you likely to do in that instance? If the narrative that got you into the relationship was something is wrong with me, what are you likely to do if that narrative perpetuates? You're going to end up in another toxic relationship. And then the cycle continues. I'm the queen of that. I lived that for like 10 years. It doesn't work.
Which, by the way, we have those narratives because of who we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. Which is why don't go to friends and family to help you.
And it's not like they're shoving that down your throat, but it's because of how we experience those relationships through a lens that's usually very young.
Yeah.
But a whole nother conversation.
So healing is really going to look like an actual analysis of not what's wrong with me, what happened to me? What were the circumstances in my life that led me to maintain this? What were the stories that I had about myself, the world, and other people that made me believe that I could fix them, or I could change them, or I could fix the situation, or this is all that there is for me, or whatever that narrative is for you. That is one of the biggest things that I believe that keeps people trapped in these cycles. You don't actually heal. You don't actually allow yourself to go through the grieving process and experience the full range of emotions, which you're naturally going to feel because you feel massive guilt and shame. And then you don't actually process the experiences that happened that led you to making those decisions in the first place. And history repeats itself. We've all heard that phrase. We all know it. It just is what it is. So allowing yourself to actually really analyze and address what happened is going to allow you to then make better choices in the future so that it never happens again. And that's exactly what I did, and why that was the last. I was in one bad relationship after that, but it wasn't toxic. Like this, it gets better once the more you keep doing this. And it's why I am certain I will never end up in a situation like that again, because I actually did that work and I'm still doing that work. And anyone who is now in a wonderful relationship like Emilia has also done that work. So I guess that's what I'll say. I'll leave it at that because I could keep going.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, as you heal in the way that's adaptive to you and helpful for you and constructive for you from that guilt of staying in a toxic relationship, you're able to kind of bring back online. And this is how you notice that like you're making progress. And it's not at all coming within the first year. So you can put that aside. But everyone is different. So you never know. You could be that person. But you start to unlock these parts of you, right? The pieces of yourself that you've had to peel away to coexist in this relationship. And you start to have those come back online. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful parts of a healing journey, is really rediscovering parts of you that you felt as though you had to disassociate or detach from, or go hypervigilant in, or hyperactivated with, in order to have this quote unquote relationship survive regardless of whatever motivation. And when you can bring those quote unquote parts or elements of yourself back online, you can really hold a lot of compassion for what series of events got you there in the first place. And I think that that's really quite a beautiful journey. So it is worth it. And to echo sentiments of the evolved community that we literally spoke to today, you're going to be really proud of yourself for staying in there, not in the relationship that's toxic, but staying in the growth journey that you jump into, be it evolved therapy, be it evolved coaching, be it somewhere else that is helping you actually get on the journey. You will be so proud of yourself for having stuck on that journey, because that is the most important trek that you might take in your life. So with that being said, my episode suggestion is 405, How Parents Emotionally Trap You Without Realizing It.
Woof.
Bianca?
449, How to Know If a Relationship is Safe. All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you learned a lot. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.